In a village called Tauna, there were many beautiful women. The village was famous for its strong and lovely women, who could have many children. People from far away would come to see them and marry them. Among all the girls in Tauna, one stood out, and her name was Luma. Luma wasn't just beautiful, she was the most beautiful girl in the whole village. Everyone who saw her would say, "Wow, look at Luma, she's so pretty." Luma lived with her parents and her brother, Kobi. They were a small family of 4, but they were very happy. Their parents loved them very much and made sure they had everything they needed. The people in the village would often say, "Luma is such a good girl, she helps her mother at home and is kind to everyone." Luma's beauty was not only on the outside, she had a kind heart too. Everyone in Tauna loved Luma and her family because they were kind and generous. Life in Tauna was simple and peaceful. The sun always shone brightly, the birds sang sweet songs, and the trees were full of fruit. Luma and her family enjoyed every moment together in their small village. But one day, something very sad happened. Luma and Kobi's parents passed away. It was a hard time for them since they were still young and didn't know what to do without their parents. The house that used to be full of laughter became quiet, and their hearts were filled with sadness. Luma and Kobi had to be strong and decided to take care of each other. Every day, they worked hard to survive. Luma would go to the market to sell fruits and vegetables, while Kobi helped the farmers in the fields. Even though life was now difficult, they grew closer as brother and sister, sharing everything from food to worries. They would sit under a big tree at the end of the day and talk about their dreams, hoping to make their parents proud. As the years went by, Luma grew older. She was no longer the little girl who played in the fields with her brother. She was now a young woman, and in Tauna, women were expected to marry. Most girls in the village got married by the time they were 18, but Luma was already 25 and still unmarried. Her relatives started to worry. They would visit her and say, "Luma, you are getting older, all the girls your age are married with children. Why haven't you found a husband yet?" Luma would smile and reply, "I want to choose the right man. I'm not in a hurry." But the pressure continued. Her relatives and even the villagers whispered behind her back, wondering why Luma was still single. At the market, people would ask her, "Luma, when will we hear the sound of wedding drums for you?" Luma felt the pressure, but she didn't want to rush into marriage. She wanted to marry a man who would love and respect her. Luma had been seeing a man named Ryan for a while. He was kind and hardworking and she liked him, but she wasn't sure if he was the one. After another visit from her concerned relatives, Luma sat down and thought deeply. She didn't want to be the last unmarried woman in the village, and she was tired of the whispers behind her back. Finally, Luma made a decision. She went to Ryan and said, "Ryan, I think it's time for us to get married." Ryan was very happy, as he had been waiting for her to say those words. "I will make you happy, Luma," he promised. And so, the preparations for their wedding began, and the whole village celebrated the news. In the village of Malacca, everyone was excited because Luma, the most beautiful girl in the village, was finally getting married. The drums were ready to play, and the songs would soon fill the air. Luma was about to take a big step in her life, hoping she had made the right choice. Her wedding with Ryan was the biggest the village had seen in a long time. The drums were loud, the songs were sweet, and everyone danced with joy. The whole village came to celebrate Luma's big day, and people whispered, "Luma is finally getting married." It was a day full of happiness and excitement. After the wedding, Luma moved in with Ryan and his family. She was determined to be the best wife she could be. Every morning, Luma would wake up early to fetch water and prepare food for the family. She cleaned the house until it sparkled and helped Ryan's mother with whatever she needed. Ryan's family was very pleased with her, and his mother would often say, "Luma, you are such a good wife. We are lucky to have you." Luma would smile, feeling proud of herself. However, as time passed, Ryan's mother began to worry. 2 years had gone by since the wedding, and Luma still hadn't had a child. In Malacca, children were very important, and a wife was expected to have them soon after marriage. Ryan's mother became concerned and wondered why Luma hadn't become pregnant. One day, she asked Luma, "Luma, is everything okay? It's been 2 years, and there's still no child. What's wrong?" Luma felt sad and unsure. She didn't know why she hadn't gotten pregnant and wanted a child as much as Ryan's mother did. But no matter how hard they tried, nothing seemed to happen. "I don't know, Mama," Luma replied quietly. "We are trying, but nothing is happening." Ryan's mother frowned and thought deeply. She loved Luma, but she was worried about the future. She wanted grandchildren to carry on the family name. Every time she looked at Luma, she would sigh and shake her head, wondering what the problem could be. Luma noticed that Ryan's mother was becoming more distant and worried. The house, which was once full of laughter, now felt quiet with concern. Luma continued to do all her chores and help around the house, but inside, she felt the heavy burden of not being able to give Ryan's family a child. The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, but still there was no baby. Luma began to worry even more. She prayed every night, hoping for a miracle, but deep down, she feared what might happen if she couldn't have a child. As time went on and still no child came, Ryan's mother grew more anxious. She couldn't wait any longer and decided to take matters into her own hands. One day, while Luma was away, Ryan's mother brought another woman into their home. This woman was young and beautiful, and Ryan's mother believed she could have a child. She spoke to Ryan privately and said, "My son, I want you to be with this woman for a while. We need to know if you can father a child." Ryan was shocked and didn't know what to say, but he trusted his mother. Reluctantly, he agreed to her plan. A few weeks later, the woman returned with news: she was pregnant. Ryan was stunned, and his mother was overjoyed. It was now clear that Ryan was not the problem. When Luma returned home, she could feel that something had changed. The air was thick with tension. Ryan's mother called her aside and said, "Luma, it's time for you to leave. You cannot have a child, and that means you cannot stay here as my son's wife. There is no place in this house for a woman who cannot give us children." Luma's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. She felt ashamed and helpless. She had tried her best, but it wasn't enough. With tears in her eyes, Luma packed her things and left the house that had been her home for the past 2 years. She walked slowly back to her brother Kobi's house, feeling the weight of shame on her shoulders. The villagers watched her as she passed by, whispering, "Poor Luma, she couldn't give Ryan a child." When Luma finally reached Kobi's house, he opened the door and saw his sister standing there, broken and tearful. In the village of Nalea, Luma returned to her brother Kobi's house, looking lost and broken. Without saying a word, Kobi hugged her tightly. He didn't need to ask what had happened. He could see the pain in her eyes. Luma stayed with her brother, but she felt like a shadow of her former self. The laughter that once filled her life was gone. She tried to be strong, but the shame of being sent away for not having a child was too much to bear. All she could think about was how she had failed as a wife, and she wondered if she would ever find happiness again. Luma spent many months at her brother Kobi's house, feeling sad and alone. She thought she would never marry again. But her relatives didn't give up on her. They believed that Luma wasn't the problem, and that she could still have a child. They would visit her and say, "Luma, you are so young and beautiful. Don't lose hope. You should try to marry again." At first, Luma didn't want to listen. She was too afraid of being hurt again. But her relatives kept encouraging her, saying, "Maybe Ryan wasn't the right one for you. You deserve another chance at happiness." One day, a man from a faraway village came to Nalea. His name was Taro, and he was very handsome. He had heard about the beauty and kindness of the women in Nalea and decided to come and find a wife. When he saw Luma, he was captivated by her beauty and gentle nature. Taro approached Luma and asked her to be his wife. Luma was hesitant at first, but Taro was kind and patient. He promised to take care of her and make her happy. After much thought and with the support of her relatives, Luma agreed to marry Taro. They had a simple but joyful wedding, and Luma moved to Taro's village, hoping for a fresh start. In Taro's village, Luma tried her best to be a good wife, just as she had done before. She helped around the house, cooked delicious meals, and treated Taro's parents with respect. Taro's parents were pleased with her and often said, "Luma is a wonderful wife. We are lucky to have her in our family." But as the months passed, the same worry crept into their home. A year had gone by and still there was no child. Taro started to grow anxious. He had come all the way to Nalea to find a wife who could give him children, but now it seemed that Luma could not. One evening, Taro sat down with Luma and said, "Luma, it's been a year, and we still don't have a child. I am very worried. I need a family, and without children, our marriage feels empty." Luma's heart sank. She had feared this moment, and now it was happening again. She didn't know what to say. She tried to hold back her tears as she replied, "Taro, I'm trying my best, but I don't know why this is happening." Taro sighed deeply and said, "I'm sorry, Luma, but I cannot wait any longer. I need to have children, and if you cannot give them to me, then I must find someone who can." With a heavy heart, Taro made the difficult decision to send Luma away. Once again, Luma packed her things and left the home she had tried so hard to make her own. She returned to her brother Kobi's house, feeling even more broken than before. Back in Nalea, Luma felt like a failure. She had been married twice, and both times she had been sent away because she couldn't have a child. The villagers whispered behind her back, "Poor Luma, she's been unlucky again." Luma didn't know what to do. She felt lost and wondered if she would ever find happiness or if she was destined to be alone forever. Luma stayed at her brother Kobi's house, her heart heavy with sorrow. She couldn't understand why she couldn't have a child. Desperation filled her days and nights. She wanted to find a solution, so she began visiting healers from different villages. Each healer she met promised her that she would have a child, but no matter what they did, nothing changed. Luma felt more lost with each passing day. Luma prayed and hoped, but deep down she was afraid nothing would work. Then one day, someone told her about a wise old woman who lived in a small hut deep in the forest. People said this woman had special knowledge and could see things others couldn't. Luma decided to visit her, hoping she might have the answers she was searching for. When Luma arrived at the wise woman's hut, she was greeted by a small, kind-looking old woman. The woman invited Luma inside and listened quietly as Luma poured out her heart. She told the wise woman about her 2 failed marriages, her longing for a child, and her growing fear that she would never become a mother. The wise woman nodded slowly, and after a long pause, she spoke gently, "Luma, your struggle is not because of anything you have done long ago. When you were just a little girl, your parents did something to protect you." Luma looked at the woman, confused. "What do you mean?" she asked. The wise woman continued, "Your parents were afraid that, because of your beauty, you might get into trouble and become pregnant before marriage. So, they used a powerful spell to lock your womb, thinking they were protecting your future." Luma's eyes widened in shock. "Lock my womb, is that why I can't have a child?" she asked, her voice shaking. The wise woman nodded. "Yes, Luma, the spell on your womb has kept you from becoming pregnant, but there is a way to unlock it." Luma leaned forward, desperate to hear the solution. "Please, tell me what I must do," she begged. The wise woman hesitated for a moment before saying, "The lock can only be broken if you sleep with someone who shares your blood. Your parents didn't mean for this to happen, but the spell they used was very strong. Only your brother, Kobi, can unlock your womb." Luma felt her heart stop. "My brother," she whispered in disbelief. The idea was shocking and unthinkable. "There must be another way," she cried. But the wise woman shook her head sadly. "I'm afraid there isn't. The spell is powerful, and only sharing blood in this way can break it." Luma sat in silence, her mind racing. She couldn't imagine doing such a thing, but the thought of never having a child was unbearable. She felt trapped, torn between her dream of becoming a mother and the horror of what she would have to do to make that happen. Seeing the pain in Luma's eyes, the wise woman spoke softly, "I know this is difficult, Luma. You must think carefully before making any decision, but this is the truth. Luma left the wise woman's hut, her heart heavy with what she had learned. She didn't know what to do. The path ahead was dark and filled with impossible choices. As she walked back to her brother's house, she realized her life would never be the same. At home, Luma was in turmoil. The thought of sleeping with her brother Kobi to unlock her wound was something she couldn't accept. It felt wrong, but the fear of never having a child haunted her. She sought out other healers, hoping for a different answer, but nothing worked. Desperate, Luma entered 2 more marriages, but each ended the same way: no children, and her husband sent her away. The villagers whispered that Luma was cursed, and the constant gossip weighed heavily on her. She was now 35, and her dream of becoming a mother seemed impossible. The wise woman's words echoed in her mind, growing stronger each day. But how could she ask her brother, Kobi, the one who had always protected her, to do such a thing? Luma struggled with the dilemma, feeling trapped between her desire for a child and the horror of what it would take to have one. As time passed, her desperation grew, and she knew she had to make a decision soon, even though the choice felt unbearable. After many heartbreaks, Luma had almost lost hope of finding happiness, but then she met Kito, a wealthy man from the city. Kito, looking for a wife who could give him many children, was drawn to Luma's beauty and grace, unaware of her struggles. Luma felt flattered by Kito's attention, but fear gnawed at her. She knew he wanted children, and she couldn't give him that. Yet, the idea of marrying a rich man from the city and being admired was hard to resist. When Kito proposed, Luma said yes, hoping that maybe this time things would be different. As the wedding day got closer, her fear grew stronger. She knew that once they were married, it wouldn't take long for Kito to find out the truth. She couldn't stand the thought of being sent away again, humiliated in front of everyone. The wise woman's words echoed in her mind, and Luma began to believe there was only one way to avoid disaster. Luma made a terrible decision. On the night of her wedding, before leaving the village with Kito, she would have to sleep with her brother Kobi. It was the only way to break the lock on her womb, the only way to ensure she could give Kito the children he desperately wanted. The idea filled Luma with shame and dread, but she felt trapped. "I don't want to do this," she whispered to herself again and again. "But I have no choice. I must have a child, or I will lose everything." On the day of the wedding, the village of Nalea was full of joy. It was the biggest celebration they had seen in years. People from all around came to witness the marriage of Luma and Kito. Music played, dancers danced, and the sweet scent of flowers filled the air. But Luma could hardly enjoy any of it. Her mind was full of fear and guilt. She knew that once the celebration ended, she would have to go through with her plan. She would have to find a way to be alone with Kobi and convince him to do the unthinkable. As the sun began to set and the wedding day came to an end, Luma made an excuse to leave early. She told everyone she had forgotten something important at Kobi's house and needed to go back quickly. No one questioned her, and they let her leave without suspecting anything. Luma's heart pounded as she walked to Kobi's house. She knew what she was about to do would change everything, but she felt like she had no other option. She was torn between the fear of losing Kito and the horror of what she was about to ask her brother. The night was dark as Luma approached Kobi's house, her heart heavy with fear and shame. Her hand shook as she opened the door. Inside, Kobi was surprised to see her. "What are you doing here, Luma?" Kobi asked, smiling. "Shouldn't you be with Kito?" Luma forced a smile and said, "I just want to say goodbye before I leave with Kito." Kobi, unaware of the turmoil in Luma's heart, nodded and welcomed her in. They sat together, talking about old times, but Luma could barely focus. Her mind raced and guilt consumed her. She knew she had to act soon, but every moment of hesitation made her feel sicker inside. Finally, Luma couldn't bear it any longer. She stood up and walked over to Kobi, her hands trembling. "Kobi," she whispered, "I need your help in a way I can't explain." Kobi looked at her, confused. "What do you mean, Luma? What's wrong?" With tears in her eyes, Luma began to tell him about the wise woman's words. She explained how their parents had locked her wound to protect her, and how the only way to unlock it was to be with someone who shared her blood. Kobi, she pleaded, I know this is wrong, but I'm desperate. Luma was desperate. If I don't do this, I will never have a child, and I'll lose everything. Please, Kobi, I need your help. Kobi's face turned pale as he realized what Luma was asking. He shook his head and backed away. Luma, no, this is wrong. You're my sister, I can't do this. I won't do this. But Luma, with tears streaming down her face, reached out to him, trying to convince him. Please, Kobi, you're the only one who can help me. I don't want to do this, but I have no choice. Please, don't leave me like this. Kobi was horrified and couldn't believe what he was hearing. Luma, stop, I can't, this is wrong, and you know what, I love you, but not like this, please don't ask me to do this. Just then, the door opened, and Kobi's wife walked in. She froze, shocked to see Luma clinging to Kobi, her dress messy and her face full of desperation. What is going on here? She cried, her voice trembling with anger and confusion. Kobi quickly pulled away from Luma, trying to explain. It's not what it looks like, Luma needs help, but not like this. But his wife was already running out of the house, shouting for the villagers. Come quickly, something terrible is happening, come and see. Within moments, the whole village was awake and gathered outside Kobi's house. People whispered and gasped, trying to figure out what was going on. The village elders arrived, demanding to know the truth. Realizing there was no way to hide what had happened, Luma fell to her knees and began to weep. I'm sorry, she cried. I'm so sorry, I didn't want this, but I didn't know what else to do. Through her tears, Luma confessed everything. She told him about the wise woman's words, how her parents had locked her womb to protect her, and how she believed that only being with her brother could break the curse. She also admitted that she had lied to Kito, pretending she could give him children, even though she knew the truth. The villagers stood in silence, their faces filled with pity, anger, and sorrow. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Some whispered to each other, how could this happen? Poor Luma, driven to such desperation. After hearing Luma's confession, the elders turned to Kito, who stood in the crowd, his face pale and his eyes wide with shock. They asked him what he wanted to do now that he knew the truth. Kito remained silent for a long time, his heart heavy with betrayal and disappointment. He had loved Luma, or at least the person he thought she was. Now, everything was ruined. He didn't know if he could ever forgive her, but he couldn't ignore the sadness in her eyes. After what seemed like forever, Kito finally spoke, his voice low and filled with pain. If Luma believes this is the only way to break the curse, then I won't stand in the way, but this is not the life I imagined. I don't know if I can ever look at her the same way again. The elders nodded, understanding how difficult the situation was. They decided that if Kobi agreed, the curse could be broken that night, but they also knew that Luma's actions had already caused a deep wound in the village, one that would take a long time to heal. Kobi, his heart torn apart by what had happened, looked at Luma with tears in his eyes. He loved his sister, but he never imagined their bond would be tested in such a terrible way. After a long moment he finally agreed, though it broke his heart to do so. That night, before Luma left for the city with Kito, she and Kobi did what was necessary to break the curse. It was a night filled with sorrow and shame, and though the curse was lifted, the memory of that night would haunt them both forever. When it was over, Kobi left the house, unable to bear the weight of what had happened. The next morning, Kobi packed his belongings and, with his wife by his side, left the village of Nalea, never to return. Luma, now free from the curse, left with Kito for the city, but she carried the memory of that night and the heavy price she had paid to fulfill her deepest wish. Soon after moving to the city with Kito, Luma discovered she was pregnant, and the news brought joy and relief. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Abi, in honor of her brother Kobi. Though Abe was Kobi's child, Kito accepted her as his own, and their family grew with the birth of twins, a boy and a girl. Luma and Kito built a happy life filled with love and laughter. They became known for their kindness, and their home was always welcoming to others. The people of Nalea were happy to hear that Luma had finally found peace. Kobi had settled in a distant village where no one knew their story. Although he never returned, Kobi found some peace in his new life, always carrying the memory of his sister close to his heart. Luma missed her brother, but understood why he left. She made sure her children knew about Kobi's deep love for her, and the sacrifice he made. In the end, Luma and Kito lived happily, surrounded by their children, while Kobi, far away, found comfort in his quiet life, knowing he had helped bring Luma happiness. I hope you enjoyed this story. If so, please like the video, share it with your family and friends, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more enchanting tales like this one. Goodbye.